Well, it's 3 o'clock, so let's get started. Yeah, thanks for coming to see yet another talk about artificial intelligence at UC Tech. We're pretty proud of the work we've done. I'm Eric Meeks. I'm the CTO for the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, and
Director of Data Strategy and the Clinical and Translational Science Institute at UCSF.
And how do we get this to work? You go with this, right? Got it.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so this is theoretically about artificial intelligence, but which is super broad, but really we're talking about LLMs here.
And but a little bit, about us and about our team, and also a little bit about the agenda here. Our team, we're very, very pragmatic, and so we're going to show you the stuff we've done. We actually have measurable results, but then we're going to go into sort of the speculative parts of AI because actually that's pretty fun. So it's like we're pragmatic, but it doesn't make us boring. Our group does innovative infrastructure for UCSF, so we basically do pretty creative stuff, which is a lot of fun, but we don't do one-off development for anybody. We try and build things that can be reused by people. And do you want to go with the names, or no, we don't have to do that?
Yeah, so there's our team. Everybody on pictured has been involved in some way, and we've also gotten input over the course of some of the projects that we're going to be sharing from a lot of folks on the outside. So we're really appreciative of there's the two of us up here, but there's a lot of people who have been involved.
And yeah, I'll talk a little bit about this. So we've done a lot of presentations, and normally what we do is we'll have some product we've been working on for years. We'll see an opportunity to submit, and we're like, oh, we're so proud of our work. Let's go and submit what we've been doing. We'll admit that this happened a little bit backwards. We saw that there was the submissions open for UC Tech. We knew we wanted to talk, and we knew we wanted to do something with ChatGPT or something with artificial intelligence. And we're like, let's come up with a project and see if we learn something. And that is not a cop-out. I'm actually very thankful to UC Tech for motivating us to do this project. I don't know if we would have done it without that. And we learned some good stuff, and hopefully you'll agree. Is this you? Or, yeah.
So our team, we all started playing with ChatGPT around the same time. I presume folks here have also played with ChatGPT. I see a couple of nods. Raise your hand if you've used ChatGPT or any other LLM. And keep your hand raised if you've used it in kind of a work context. Okay, so anybody with your hand raised, we're going to come back to you because we also want to hear some stories of what people have done, because it's totally all over the map. So when we started playing with ChatGPT, we just started coming up with ideas. We just started throwing ideas at the wall of all the things we could do with it, and some of them were bad ideas. Some of them were regulatorily just a really we can't do it. But out of just this long list of things we kind of threw at the wall, there's a couple of really small pragmatic ideas that we came up with, and we're going to share two of those stories of very safe, low stakes things that we tried and what we learned.
Very safe. We want to emphasize that. Actually, before I get to that, does everybody here know what a clinical trial is? Okay, good. When I first joined UCSF, I didn't know. It wasn't part of the interview question, so that's good. Yeah, on the topic of safe, do you folks know about, is this the Vanderbilt thing? Yeah, we didn't want to get famous the bad way about this, where Vanderbilt generated a condolence letter to students after a shooting, and they helped use ChatGPT or some AI to generate the letter. And once that was out there was a huge backlash against it. And so even if what you're doing is sort of technically okay, the optics around this stuff is very, very dangerous. And we're very aware of that. So you want to talk about this? Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the ideas that so text generation is these LLMs are incredible in terms of the quality of text generation. So the first thing we tried, and this is something that my coworkers Brian Turner and Candace Pune really worked on, was trying to help researchers write bios for their profiles. So our team, we run UCSF Profiles, which, Eric, do you want to talk about it? What is Profiles?
Hey, Profiles is, we actually host them for all of the UCs with health campuses. It's basically sort of like a LinkedIn for biomedical researchers. It showcases all their work. And in a lot of ways, it's like the way that they own their online brand. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a vain thing. It's how people find out about their research, the general public as well as other researchers. And so it helps with collaboration. The New York Times like links to these things all the time when they cite one of our researchers. And we've presented on it a ton of times.
Yeah, so every researcher has a profile page. It has, well, if all goes well, it's got a photo. It lists all their biomedical publications. It's just kind of a quick way of like understanding who these people are. But the information on these, they're like a little bit spotty. We almost always have somebody's publications, but we don't always have the other information. And it's so much nicer to be able to look at a profile and like see someone's like little mini bio or narrative, because you actually understand in their own words what it is that they're excited about. Publications are also very backward facing. Like, what did you do like 5 years ago, as opposed to like, this is what I'm really excited about right now. But because we have thousands of researchers at UCSF for whom their profiles don't actually include a bio, for us, it's a little bit of a gap. And we tried to figure out how to do this. So we, one of the things that we're going to try and do is actually share specific prompts. I think this is the third. We've probably seen 2 AI sessions today. They've been a little high level and very like prognostication type mode, which is fine, but the actual prompts matter. So the first version, kind of the primary version of the prompt that we wrote, was different for every single researcher. And we were like, write a very simple 4 or 5 sentence career summary for a associate professor in the radiology department. Once he started running that, like the tone just really needed help. So we started to get very, very, very specific. Don't be too casual. Hi, my name is, that's, you know, it's just a way that we, maybe a lot of researchers don't write. Don't be too proud. Like we found ChatGPT, like if we didn't tell it to do that, it'd be like, I am a world-renowned researcher. And like, yes, you might be, but like nobody hopefully talks like that.
Which did sound very authentic, actually. Some of them do talk like that, but
and the thing about it that was interesting is like we could actually look at the stuff that we already know on somebody's profiles page of here are the publications they've written, and to be like just to be able to give the prompt, like here are the last 10 or 20 or whatever publications they've written. And that kind of gives the LLM, that gives ChatGPT a little bit of a sense of who this person is. And at which point in time, here, why don't you?
yeah. And so we wrote up these narratives, and we had ChatGPT write these narratives. And before we posted them, of course, we sent them to the researchers first email to say, what do you think of this? And some of them we told we used GPT, and some of them we didn't. You've heard a lot about the bias that's in AI. Well, there's actually also a bias we have against AI, which became very clear once this was sent out. And part of me even wonders, like, is this because we chose the term AI? And like people just get, indexed like that, which is great for marketing. But if we'd called it like NLP++, like nobody probably would have cared. They would just be like, whatever, just another technology. But I think using the word intelligence really sort of gets under humans' skins. And anyways, some of the responses we got from the researchers who knew we used ChatGPT. And if you stay to the end, I'll give you the names of the people who actually wrote the stuff. Valuable resources are being wasted on this. Well, this is my time. I guess I should be proud that they consider my time so valuable. Not ready for prime time yet. Clunky and is incomplete since my profile page is incomplete. Well, that's sort of on you. And so when they know that a robot is behind it, it's like there's gloves are pulled off. There's no soft punches. But for others where they didn't know that and this is all anecdotal, there's no p-value behind any of this data, of course, but it tells the story. The overview is excellent. Please put on my page. Thank you, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for reaching out. I choose option B. And what was funny is even when we sent them really bad overviews, but they didn't know it was by ChatGPT, they were like, it's not bad, but please make these changes. So it's like, we even saw someone, it's like, yeah, everything you said about me is wrong. It's somebody else, but thank you for putting in the effort. That was really kind of you, and all that stuff. So, it just sort of further pointed out we need to be careful about this stuff because people are sensitive about it.
And in this very tiny example of, I don't know, maybe we emailed something like 15 or 20 people. For the folks who actually liked what we wrote, or in some cases they were like, well, this is fine, but really this is how I would rewrite it a little bit. It actually went on people's profiles. This is not like scaled up. It was just like a micro test, but it's kind of fun to see like what those immediate reactions are. The second thing we did, and this is kind of a much bigger test for which we may not have p-values, but we actually have some real data for this. So one of the other products our team runs is a clinical trial search engine for UCSF. We also, like Eric was saying with profiles, we host sites for UCI, UCSD, UC Davis, like really similar clinical trial search engines. One that's like cross UC. So if it weren't for sites like this, you wouldn't really know like all the clinical trials on campus. So now you can go to a website, in our case, clinical trials, UCSF EDU, type in what you're looking for, and up comes like all the clinical trials that are like now recruiting for that topic. So what happens? So yes, some people go to the homepage and they run a search on the search engine, but it's much more likely. I think 70% of people actually, well, maybe not 70, I think maybe 40% of people start on the page on the left, which is a condition-specific page. So in this case, it's like clinical trials at UCSF/kidney transplant. And that's a page that has like a landing page. It has information and links off to every single trial on the system. You click on that and you get to the page on the right, which is about a specific clinical trial. And if you're curious, if you're interested, if maybe you're a doctor and one of your patients might be eligible, you can click on that I'm interested button and then actually send your information to the study team. And maybe they can tell you what the eligibility criteria are or whatever else. So the challenge with this, and this kind of goes back to the title of the talk, the descriptions of clinical trials are written by researchers and they're kind of written for researchers. And it's just really, really complicated. I don't have a biomedical background. I am not a doctor. I do not understand. I mean, maybe I understand like every second word. Like I understand the articles, I understand some of the adjectives, noun phrases, not so much. And this is, it's hard because you actually want people to be able to join these clinical trials. And when people can make sense of it, that has all kinds of issues around recruiting and access and equity. And we're going to come back to this in a little bit. So also, I don't know if any of you have tried using one of these like grade level calculators. The Fleisch-Kincaid is one of these reading level calculators. So typically in one of these like researcher generated clinical trial descriptions, they're 17th grade, which I guess means that like you need to be at least 4 years of college, maybe 5 years of college for some of us, and maybe like early grad school to even be able to make sense of this. So it's pretty bad. Something like 70% of visitors to our clinical trials website, they actually come in through search engines like Google. And so, okay, so typical Google search result, you go and search for like glioblastoma clinical trial as one does. And just to kind of make sense of if you have, I mean, if that's like an actual condition you're interested in,
You know about it.
Yeah. So at the top where it says UCSF, that is the name of the institution that's publishing it. Right underneath it is the URL. Underneath that in the big blue text is the title tag, the HTML title tag. And underneath that where it says the study includes a double-blind, placebo-controlled, et cetera, that's Google pulling out, in the best case, a meta description tag in the HTML. But realistically, what Google is doing is they're pulling out a snippet of text, maybe a sentence from the page that they think is like representative or interesting, and they're including that in the search result on the assumption that you, the Google user, are going to look at that and be like, oh yeah, okay, this gives me a little bit more information than the title. That is a terrible sentence that it found on there. So here's what we did. This is an actual problem we have, and we tried looking at ChatGPT-based text generation to try to figure out if you can write a summary of the trials on one of these like trial condition-specific pages that list all the trials. And once we do that, we're curious if we can like rewrite this like without actually touching the original researcher created text in a way that makes a little more sense for like lay people. And finally, there's a way where if we do this, we can help Google actually show better snippets and if it makes a difference. So one of the things that we're really excited about with this talk is we want to share like actual prompts. I've definitely met a lot of folks who are like, I tried ChatGPT, I put in like what is or who is, and then they insert their own name or something. Then your like fake bio comes up and it's wrong, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's bad. It's just hallucinating. So it's all about really the prompts. So the first version of the prompt that we created was like really, really simple. Write a 1-paragraph description of the following clinical trials. And then we just listed the titles of the clinical trials. It was fine. I mean, it was a start. It was interesting enough that we were like, okay, there's something here, but that wasn't enough. Because like after we ran it a bunch of times, we're like, we're finding the same kinds of errors. So you probably can't read this, but so I'm just going to like summarize this. The second version had a lot more specifics about what we wanted the prompts to do. So in this case, we're like, write a 1-paragraph summary of the pregnancy trials now recruiting. The target audience is English language learners. So we wanted to get very, very specific about the reading level and the grade level and the audience. We wanted to be very specific about the length. We're like 1 paragraph of under 70 words. The language is simple. We're prompting 4th grade level. Active voice, you're writing from the point of UCSF. And then we kept running this over and over. And every single time we found this error, we're like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Don't use repetition, long sentences. In the case of pregnancy, for example, unnecessarily gendered words, because anybody can be pregnant, don't use bullet points, etc. And finally, we're like, if you write this, the first sentence of it should actually define what this health condition is, like pregnancy or asthma or whatever else.
So this was a lot of work, but but it does scale, right? I mean, it worked for one trial, it worked for all. But if you're going to play around with this stuff, don't be afraid to invest in crafting the prompt. And you know what? Next year, that might not be necessary, but right now it is. So
it's a little bit like programming, where like you need to like just be very, very clear about that thing that you want at the end. And once you did the prompt, at the end of it, we just like every single prompt is just kind of customized. We included the full list of clinical trials in that portfolio of trials that you're describing. After we did that, we're like, okay, we got to get even more explicit. So we turned it into like 8 very specific rules. Things like no more than 75 words. First sentence should be a definition. We started like tuning the grade level. 4th grade level didn't work really well. So then we tried 8th grade reading level. Even things like write as if you're UCSF, say we have these clinical trials, not they have the clinical trials, because we're speaking on behalf of UCSF, and doing our best to like avoid hallucinations. And same thing again, we tried to include clinical trials in the text that we're feeding it. We're also trying to include like some of that researcher generated descriptions of clinical trials, which I may not understand, but maybe ChatGPT does, hopefully. And here are some examples of what we generated. Hearing loss means not being able to hear well. We have clinical trials to help people with hearing loss. And then it actually describes the two studies. One is we've got clinical trials for cochlear implants, another one for teletherapy. I can read this and I can actually make sense of it. So it's a little bit exciting.
Yeah, I mean, people understand what this is, and that actually makes a difference. Or maybe it does. You have to stay to the end to find out. But
and here's another one. If you breathe in smoke, it can hurt your health. UCSF is looking for healthy people to join a study. And even stuff like that is important because like sometimes, like smoke inhalation isn't a condition. It's not like you inhaled smoke and you're like, like now let me find a clinical trial about this because I really want to support science. The study compares the breathing in smoke, and then it'll just describes how that one trial works. And it made a huge difference. We were prompting for things like 8th grade level, English language learner. ChatGPT didn't actually get everything right, but comparing like where we started with, which was 17th grade level, and what we ended up with at 10th grade level, it's a huge improvement. And this is something where I want to thank Amy Williams, who works with us at CTSI, because for her, she pushed us really hard on readability as an access issue, as an equity issue. Both in terms of English language learners, in terms of folks who don't have the access of like a 17th grade education, to be able to kind of really make sense of this. This is not, so which is why we're actually pushing for things like descriptions of conditions that seem maybe a little bit simple, but in many cases it's better to err a little bit on the simpler side because we want all kinds of people to be able to access clinical trials.
Getting to yes. So we talked a little bit about the process. We'll talk about the technology. There was certainly a political side to getting this project done, which is actually was the most work and arguably the most interesting and most valuable. So just a little bit about like the concerns about using GPT in academia. Two different things. One is, what data are you putting into GPT? And there was at one point where after we'd already started this, I saw like a big email that came out from somebody fancy at UCSF about using GPT and when not to use it. And I got scared that we're going to be shot down before we can even use this. And basically it was around the type of data you put into GPT, because they don't want somebody putting in like patient data, having it pop up on the other side of the world. Fortunately, all of our data is public web data. So like we didn't have to worry about that. But they're also concerned, about the other thing would be not just patient data, but are we going to be giving away sort of like corporate secrets to where like Stanford can basically copy our research and get the next Nobel Prize before we do? But yeah, we were lucky. We didn't have any sort of concerns on the input side of things. But the output side of things, things weren't that easy. And again, this goes back to sort of the bias that people have against this. So we asked, is it okay for us to use GPT to impact these clinical trial sites? Because people were scared. They're like, we don't know what it's going to say. We don't know if it's going to hallucinate and mislead somebody. We don't know if it's going to cause somebody to snow crash because it gives them some kind of information they can't handle. And when we first asked up the chain, the answer that came back wasn't yes. They were sort of like, we're not sure we're comfortable with you doing this. And we're like, we already submitted and got accepted to talk about this project. And if you shut us down, we're going to talk about that and be a big whistleblower. But fortunately, that didn't happen. And this was something we learned. Be careful about how you ask to use these things. And even Nervin was a little nervous about me putting this up there. Which of these is true? We want to use AI to influence people in making health decisions. Are you okay with that? I mean, that is not a good way, I would say, to ask the question. But of course it's true. I mean, we're at UCSF. Everything we do is about health sciences. Even the most back office use of ChatGPT or a spell checker is for some level improving health. So just get comfortable with that. But that's not necessarily having a lead in it. We eventually crafted an email where we explained, we do all this stuff already for SEO. We do grammar checking. We use all these Python libraries. We do spell checking. This is just another technical tool in the toolbox to help lift the SEO. And we're going to pay attention to it. And actually, that's sort of what we think sort of got us approval. And what was funny was like later, like a week or so later, another email came out from the bigwigs at UCSF about ChatGPT, where we saw they had used, I think, the toolbox language or something. And we were like, oh, we think they picked that term up from us. And we were very, very proud that we had figured out a way to sell this. You want to do this one?
So in order to kind of make the argument that this is just another tool in the toolbox, we decided to be super conservative and actually manually review these. So the UCSF clinical trial site, we have web pages about every single health condition of every single trial at UCSF, of which there's 1,200 plus 1,300 or so. And we looked through 800 generated condition-specific snippets or paragraphs. And a human being, everybody on our team, went through and looked at these. And there are some people here who actually had to look at.
It was a labor of love. It was a lot of work.
I mean, the prompt generation stuff is easy. Just the amount of eyes glazing over of description. It was ridiculous. I'm really grateful for people to take time out to actually start looking at this AI generated text. At the end of this, we had maybe 3 or 4 questions for every single one. The answers had to be yes, 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 yes. And if it passed all 4 criteria, including a free text thing, only then did we consider it good enough. As long as there was even a single no, we're okay, yeah, let's just be safe. And do you want to talk about what we did with the 400 that actually made it all the way through?
Yeah, just talk a little bit about the technology and execution. And this is, it's a tech conference, so I don't mind getting into the weeds of this a little bit. Well, you did this, so you talk about the workflow.
I mean,
okay, fine. Arnav did most of the work, created the prompt templates, and basically you worked on generating somehow a script into a single document that had all the different prompts to give to ChatGPT. And so I don't even know what language you use, Python, probably something like that, an amazing programmer. But actually calling the GPT API, which is how we did it, not through the browser, was something that for some reason, despite your technical skills, you didn't want to do. And that got dumped on me, and I did that. But it's a good, we're a team, right? A little bit about the back-end technology. So he hands me, this list of all these prompts, and I'm playing around with ChatGPT, and I have an API key to use it. And they have example code in Python and Node.js. But I don't know Python that well, I don't know JS. And so I decided, I'm going to do it in Java because I'm old and I know Java really well. I remember when UC Tech was called UC Santa Cruz, if any of you remember that, if you get that joke. Fortunately, and I'm going to have to thank this person later, I found somebody who had created a very wonderful open source sort of wrapper for talking to the API with Java, this Theo Canning. So I'm very grateful for him. Spent like just a couple of hours hacking out the code to take his prompts and to go in there and get the responses. Eventually put it up in GitHub. This is probably the ugliest code I've written in my life. I actually take a lot of pride in writing aesthetically beautiful code, and this isn't it, but it worked perfectly. It was completely did what we needed it to do. We pretty much, we used the GPT 3.5 turbo model. 4 wasn't out yet, or they didn't let me have it anyway. And I didn't have a paid for access to the API, which meant that I was rate limited. And I was like, oh, and I knew I could hunt down the corporate credit card and do all that, but I'm like, that's a hassle. So I just added a sleep command so that it would literally sleep for 20 seconds before doing the next one. I'm like, you know what? It'll still complete in 5 or 6 hours. And that is fine for the scale of this project. And the reason I say that is I'm proud of my pragmatism. It wasn't being lazy, it was being pragmatic. Anyway, so we got all the responses back. And we were definitely super indexed on, let's make sure there are no hallucinations in this thing. And those pretty much weren't a problem. And of course, we manually reviewed them all. We're doing the whole human in the loop, the HITL, and we're actually calling it human and Google in the loop, HAGTL, because we wanted to actually fact check these things that it was saying. But some of the stuff was just really super goofy. You would get a lot of things like, a foot condition is a condition of the foot. I would say half of them, they would just literally invert the 2 words. And we thought, well, this is, we can't put that out there. That might be insensitive or stupid. Although now I'm coming around to that. When you read 100 of these things, or 400 in our case, that gets old really quick. But actually for a real end user that's probably just going to hit one splash page, that actually in some ways I think can actually be comforting to them. Because it's okay, this is square one. I get this. A foot condition is a condition of the foot. I buy that. I trust you people. Anyway.
So at the end of the day, what we actually did was, so this is again one of these condition-specific landing pages, and we took this paragraph that was first we put together the prompt, ran it through the API, had a human being manually okay it. Finally, for this subset of 460 or whatever paragraphs that were okayed, we put it on the website, and there's nothing fancy about it. It's just a little introductory paragraph before the long list of trials, each one handwritten lovingly by a researcher. And they're on there right now. And it's we waited a week, and within a week or so, when Google started reindexing our site, these sentences started appearing on Google, and it made me so incredibly happy. Because here, this is an actual thing. If you go to Google right now, that first sentence, AADC deficiency affects children, etc. And boom, AADC deficiency affects children. And you can kind of make sense of it. Somebody who is searching for that term on Google, when they see that that description, they might be slightly more willing to click on it. And we are very excited. We actually have results to share. This might be the first time we're actually sharing the results with anybody. And so what we did, we looked at Google's click-throughs in the month before, in the 28 days before we did the test. We waited a week for Google to reindex hopefully the whole site or a good chunk of the site. Then we ran the test for 4 more weeks. We hope it made a difference. And the control group of the 800 or so things that we didn't actually put those paragraphs on, plus 3% clicks month over month. And for the 400 some that we put this on, plus 10%. This is not science. Like just trying to reverse engineer Google. The Google algorithm is just weird and complicated, and 4 weeks is not enough, but 10 is bigger than 3, and we will take that. And that's a good sign that there might be something here that's worth digging into or exploring, and that at the end of the day, this might actually help us recruit more people for clinical trials at UCSF, which we're very, very happy about.
Yeah, I mean, most clinical trials, the reason they don't move forward is because they can't get enough people. So anything you can do to increase that lift is huge. Now, the way we did it with all the manual review, I don't know if that's scalable long term. It was certainly fine for this conference, and we learned a lot, and we're very happy about that. But we do want to do some other stuff. So just a couple other things, next steps about what we're going to do, and then we're going to go into. There's a lot more actually. UCSF, we're actually starting to, we've been approved to use ChatGPT through Azure for sensitive data, which is really exciting because we have a couple of projects that involve sensitive data. And so we're trying to play around with ideas around that. We do want to scale up the stuff with the clinical trials. And if nothing else, we would like to play around with the newest models because the models do get a lot better. It took them a lot of effort to figure out a prompt that would actually come up with something that wasn't nonsense all the time. But with GPT-4, that might not be necessary. Okay. Takeaways and speculation. This is, if there's an open mic part of this talk, this is it. So, and I know half the people out there, so I might call you out there. But I don't know if you saw the Beyond the Hype. Well, we consider this beyond the hype. We're getting into the hype of AI because it's actually fun to speculate about AI, and we feel like we've played around with it enough to where we can act like we sort of know what we're talking about. Again, no p-values behind this, but I actually could go back and put real articles in here. If you follow Ezra Klein, listen to anything he says about AI, and you will see the sort of evolution of AI going through the hype cycle. And of course, it's going through the hype cycle. That's not the technology, that's humans. We can't help but take anything and put it through a hype cycle. But I remember when GPT first came out and there were these articles in New York Times about this thing's pretty serious. This isn't just a toy, you can actually do something with it. And then they started having all these optimistic articles about, this will change the world, hopefully for the better. There's a really horrifying, you've probably heard it, talk by Ezra Klein, where a shocking number of people who actually work at these companies that do this think that it actually could destroy humanity. And most of them, none of them think that there's more than a 50% chance it could do that, but a lot of them put it around 10% or some scary number. But then, and I was thinking about all this, and then I ran into this most recent one. This is really from the 11th. This AI, the greatest technology ever for making dumb jokes. And the reason I put this in there is it just sort of shows how we're getting comfortable with it. The AI isn't changing. Well, the AI is changing, but also more importantly, our comfort level with it, and it goes from this thing to being the destroyer of humanity to basically cats on the internet 2.0, right? And this article is actually very much worth reading because it has a way of, it's entertaining for one thing, but it has a way of describing AI that I want to talk about in this 2x2. And this is from that article. And I would actually like to see a lot of the stuff people are doing plotted on here somewhere. But what I love about this is so you got machine stupidity on the left, machine intelligence on the right, human stupidity on the bottom, human intelligence at the top. And the article is typically about how this line going this way is the fun zone where all the goofy things people are doing with AI that are actually getting a lot of attention are sort of go across the way, which sort of makes sense. This is the way you'd sort of want things to go, start small, simple, low risk, get better and better. And what was neat was he actually put AI for biology about as up, high and to the right as you can get. He's the person who wrote this stuff was actually very impressed, not by the work we did, but what people like at UCSF are doing with artificial intelligence. What this person doesn't know, though, is that we had heard a talk at UCSF about one of the ways in which AI historically has failed in biology is that they keep swinging for the fences. Like the first uses of AI for biology were trying to solve these really hard problems that were like Nobel level type things. And there are some examples of that. There is, I don't know if you're familiar with what is the AlphaFold, which is this AI that can figure out how to fold a protein. Thanks. Which is amazing, and it can do a better job than anybody else. Normally, it would take a PhD their entire 4 years to figure out how to fold one protein, and it can do them all, and that's amazing. But what they're now realizing is that, like, you know what? There is a lot of low-hanging fruit over here where we really should be focusing our efforts. And I keep thinking about the, genius is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. Like, have the AI do the 99% stuff. Like, what we're finding is that don't necessarily give it the hard problems, give it the really, really tedious problems. Just, give it all that tedious work and let it solve that for you. And I think we're going to sort of figure that out. And I think, I would say that's sort of what we're doing with this project. It's lower risk, it's easier. I definitely want to hit a home run one day, but if we're like getting singles left, right, and center and not striking out, I'm good with that. That makes everybody's lives better. Okay, and this is definitely, they have a contest for the goofiest slide at UC Tech every year, and so I'm going for that with this. No, comparing steampunk to artificial intelligence. So see if I can pull this off. I don't know why this sort of jumped out at me, but I've been shoving this on everybody. Steampunk is fake. You might not like it. You might hate it, along with pirates and tabbouleh. But I think it's interesting because it's a different view of a world, which I see sort of similar to what's happening now. It's in the eyes, of artists, so it can be whatever you want it to be. But I see it as a world where a certain form of mechanical energy, steam energy, is so like convenient and prevalent that it's essentially free. What would happen if you took this, thing that is a precious resource and made it essentially free to where like any idiot could like design an ornithopter and have it work because they could just plug in as many little steam engines as possible, and that's fine. Didn't really happen. But the one thing, is that it shows the world as a radically different place. And certain technologies actually don't advance, other ones do. And it's just, the reason it's so radically different is because, these are like fundamental economic equations that govern the way humanity behaves. And this sort of supply demand thing. And if you take something that's in such high demand, mechanical energy, and make it essentially free, it's really almost impossible to say what the constants are going to be. Artificial intelligence, mechanical energy isn't becoming free, but intellectual energy is becoming so convenient and accessible. Ask any high school student who figured this out before the teachers did. It was essentially free for writing their essays, doing whatever. Unlike, steampunk, which is sort of annoying, it looks like this is really going to happen one way or the other. We clearly have a lot of anxiety about it because we know it's really big. We don't know how big it is, but I think it is really big because, again, it's one of these, it's a change to like the fundamental economic equations of what's going on. And I just put the fashion statement in there because I think it'll be really funny if somehow it does become a fashion statement. I mean, it will go through a hype cycle. There'll be a time when people will be like, oh, artificial intelligence, I remember anybody, but there'll be some real stuff that comes out of it. Anyway, yeah, if ruminate on that, if you will. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, we're proud of our practical work and the fact that we got real results. We're brainstorming on other stuff, but if anybody has any questions about what we're doing or what we want to do, we have time.
Or for that matter, any of the folks who raise your hand saying like you played with this in a work context, if a brave person would be willing to share.
And put yourself up on here too. Thank you.
I used it to help write my performance evaluations.
Can you speak in the mic so that people on Zoom can hear you?
I use ChatGPT to help write my performance evaluations. So if I had something that they could work on, I had it fed, just like what the guy mentioned this morning, gave a nice impact statement of, what happens when somebody isn't online for a full day, the request that they be online full day and how to track their progress. So it was really convenient and made me reduce the time to write those from like 3 or 4 hours to like 1 hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, again, anything else? Yeah, I don't.
Just suddenly, nothing in the chat so far, but business cases and charters for governing groups.
What?
A business case and a charter for a governance group.
Okay. Oh, thanks.
My own experience.
Yeah.
Over here.
Or you choose.
So we started using the transcript in Zoom for meetings and then are using ChatGPT to then summarize the transcript.
Ooh, that's very clever. You should have presented on that.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, we've done that. We found that we're not great at documentation, but we're really good at giving presentations to a bunch of different people about stuff that's going on. So saved off all the presentations as text files, fed that to ChatGPT and said, produce documentation that we want to put on the website. And it wrote it really nicely. So that's something that was pretty efficient. Things we're kind of working on now, like our student staff are all into this. They download LLMs on their local machines and they're running it against our knowledge-based content. So they're using something called DAnswer, which basically integrates in with Atlassian products. We have all of our knowledge base in Confluence, and they've used that to plug into ChatGPT. Basically, instead of now searching all of our knowledge base articles, it just summarizes the answers directly. The Atlassian search, if you've ever used it, is terrible. So this is a much more efficient way to pull up answers to questions in real time for our service desk agents.
When you started talking, I see folks like 3 rows behind you just like look at each other going like, maybe we can use this.
Yeah, it's a prototype right now, but yeah.
Sandeep?
Right, talk guys. I was kind of curious about the scale model you said, which is, you still have the human in the loop.
Yes.
That isn't necessarily a bad thing because I would imagine it will still save a bunch of time because in lieu of having ChatGPT write this thing, somebody's still writing the previous, I guess, scientists writing for scientist version of those clinical trials. So wouldn't this basically give them a prompt saying, hey, here's one that system generated for you and use it as a draft and go from there?
Oh, absolutely. It definitely saves time. The question with this particular project is even for that, is there enough value? Certainly it's a lot quicker to have GPT write these things and us QA them than to us just to write them ourselves. And there are a lot of things like that, but there are some things that are happening. And again, just to go back to Ezra Klein, who mentioned this, is that, the hallucination problem, that shouldn't be a hard problem to solve. They need to, and somebody's going to come up with that. Like, I shouldn't have to Google your response. You can do that yourself. And if you don't know, just tell me you don't know. And also the other thing I think they should do, and I think we'll see this, is citing the references. Did this information, where did you get this from? Did you get this from WebMD or did you get this from Truth Social? Because I'm going to have a much different opinion if it came from one versus the other about how much I'm going to want to put it out there. But yeah, it definitely, can make stuff more efficient.
In an ideal world, this would be at the top of the workflow, and instead of us just trying to like put a band-aid on just poor quality for our use case content.
Anything else? Well, if nothing else, I mean, just a closing note, it's it is curious how this is going to change stuff, but to give props back to Stanford, one of the terms I heard is being a cyber optimist. Like, I know my kids are going to be not learning the same things I learned because they're just going to have GPT or something else to do it for them. And that can be very intimidating because it's like, how are you going to get by without that knowledge? But the idea is, they're just going to they're going to learn things and do things at the next level. I am hopeful, just like, nobody cares that a kid can't do long division, like in their mind, like in 1/10 of a second. So what? So what? They can do more interesting things. And so, and that's the cyber optimist is a quote from David Eagleman, who's a neuroscientist at Stanford, who's a brilliant person. So if you get a chance to look into any of his work, please do. But I guess you get any more questions, but we got 5 minutes back, and thanks for attending, and I'm glad it wasn't too hot up here right now. So, thanks.